What is up? I am Jimmy DeCicco, the oldest brother at Super Coffee. You're a negative person or have a pessimistic attitude, you're gonna stop.
Yeah.
I don't have to do this. My feet hurt, my legs hurt, my heart hurts. If you don't have a seat at the table, create one. And you have to put yourself in the game. You have to put yourselves in those positions to get lucky. You have to create those opportunities.
Jimmy, what's happening, brother?
Good to be here, man. Thank you guys.
Dude, it's been a long time coming.
That's right.
I think we got Mike Loudon a shout out for this, honestly.
Mikey Loud and Mikey Spills. Yeah. We could tell the Mikey Spills story later, but
I didn't know they call him Mikey Spills.
Mikey's our VP of sales at Super Coffee and one of your boys from back home.
Yeah, so my best friend, I played baseball at Seton Hall first before I transferred to Babson. So my best friend Joe from Seton Hall grew up with Mike.
Okay.
And so he was I remember like 2018, 2019-ish, he was like, oh, my buddy Mike, he was one of the first employees of this brand, Super Coffee. They're blowing up. I think they just got in a Wawa. I had a Wawa 2 minutes away. So I'm like, all right, well, I got to try it. I got to support the boys' product. And I had it for the first time. And I was like, this product is absolutely delicious. Protein, MCT oil, good healthy fats in there. And then since then, I've just like followed your guys' brand. Now we're in Austin, you're in Austin, and it's a very natural, organic thing. But it's been amazing just to follow the progression that you guys have had as a business from afar and now get to be friends with you and have you in studio.
Yeah. Oh man, this was great. And I think we connected at the ranch like maybe a year ago now. And
yes,
to be here is awesome. But I got to tell this Mikey story because he's going to appreciate that stuff. Yeah, he was captain of my brother's basketball team, Philadelphia University, 4.0 kid, had a job at JP Morgan. We poached him from JP Morgan to be like a field marketing sales rep for us, literally our first sales rep. Within that first year, I mean, we were all doing everything, right? Yeah. So Mikey's neighbor was the president of Acme, which is like a grocery chain up in the Northeast. Mikey calls my brother Jake and he's like, yo, I got us a meeting with the president of Acme. This is a huge deal. Like, we're going to sell Super Coffee in Acme. So they get in the office, Mikey's full suit, like decked out, just a 22-year-old professional.
Yeah.
Shakes the Super Coffee. The Super Coffee goes all over this guy's map on his wall, all over Mike's pants. And the poor guy, Mike, was shocked. And Jake was like, dude, what are we going to do? And ever since then, he's been Mikey Spills because he closed the deal. He reeled it in and he freaking closed the deal.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, you guys must have so many of those stories of just like you and like your brothers, just like from the early, like inception of the company that are just like, can't imagine what that's like.
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's special. You don't know what you're doing, but you just do it as hard as you can. Like we got to make bottles. Let's make as many as we can in 24 hours. Let's go to work, and you kind of, nobody teaches you how to do that stuff. So you figure it out. And the thing about the beverage industry, and I'm sure most industries, is like a good business sells a lot of product.
Yeah.
And that's all we knew. So we're like, let's go. We just got to go sell a lot of coffee. Let's go do demos on the weekends. Let's stock the shelves. They give us 4 facings. Let's try to get into 8 facings, from one part of the store. Let's try and get into another part. You just learn all these little tips and hacks on how to sell more. But I think a lot of people get caught up in making the perfect product and they lose sight of selling it.
Yes. And you guys knew that you had something special. And the way that I understand it is, didn't you find a manufacturer where you could bottle from like 9 o'clock at night to 5 a.m. or something like that? And you were just doing everything by hand, the 3 brothers?
Yeah, man. Mom and dad were there. Mom was sweeping the floors. The way that the industry works is you need stores to sell your product, right? Whole Foods Market, Washington, D.C. One store was our first store. But stores really only take you if you work with a distributor. And Whole Foods, the big distributor, is UNFI. UNFI only takes you if you have enough stores to sell to, right? We didn't have any stores and we didn't have a distributor. And then to get into a manufacturer, you have to meet minimum run sizes. Well, you can't meet those minimum runs if you don't have stores or a distributor. So we said, we're going to make product by hand. We found a Domino sugar factory in Baltimore, which is 45 minutes north of DC. This old Indian guy, Middle Eastern guy, he has a bottling line that he just bought at an auction. He's like, boys, my last shift ends at 8 and my first shift comes in at 6 a.m. As long as you clean up and you're out by 6 a.m., use the bottling line. And we didn't know how to do this. Like it was a big 100-gallon kettle. We'd pour all the ingredients in, we'd measure it out. And then we would take beer pitchers that we bought at the dollar store, and we'd fill up bottles with this coffee that we brewed. And then we would rock, paper, scissors, like 6 a.m. would come. We'd rock, paper, scissors to see which brother that just did the all-night shift had to go make deliveries that day. Yeah. So 2 of us got to go home and go to sleep, and 1 of us would have to go deliver to stores. Yeah.
That's incredible. It's like the HPLT event with the protein powder.
Yeah.
You don't know this story, but at HPLT, we'd been stocked out for like a month. And we got products sent in specifically for HPLT, and we didn't know if it was going to land on time. So they send it in like the day before the event. It's like 9 o'clock at night. and there's 2 massive boxes outside of our house, and they look like they'd been beaten to shit with a
Oh,
baseball bat,
no.
and 3 of the bags exploded. All the bags were covered in protein powder, so we're, like, hand washing everything, trying to make it look as good as possible, and they were good, and we gave them out, but it's like, those stories make you just appreciate everything that you've built so much too, right? Because it's like, when you Google Super Coffee, I think it's the article of you guys raising that $100 million Series C round is the first thing that pops up, but to go back to those stories of, like, Mike spilling the coffee off the wall or you guys hand bottling, like, it's funny, but it gives you such appreciation for what you guys have built over a couple years.
Dude, totally, and I think without the details, like, people kinda see from the outside, like, "Oh, good idea, zero sugar coffee with protein, little MCT oil, tastes good. It's a great idea. No wonder why the business is crushing it."
Yeah.
And we'll talk about crushing it a little bit later. The people have different definitions of crushing it. It's a struggle on the inside. But I think the challenge that the people don't see is exactly what you just said, right? You could come up with the perfect product, the best branding, and have no solution for it blowing up in the mail, right? And here's the other thing too, is like grocery stores sell 50,000 items. Nobody cares about your product, right? Like I always say all the time, you could put gold in a bottle and it's going to sit on the shelf and collect dust unless you're supporting it.
Mm.
And I see a lot of young entrepreneurs with these great ideas, these problems that they solve. They come up with solutions for themselves, and it's healthy. It's better for you. Usually, it doesn't taste good, which is not good. It's got to taste
Yeah.
good. Noble tastes great.
Hey,
Um, but then they're like, hey, I just got into 30 Whole Foods, and like that's when your job begins, right?
Mm.
Like the number one question I get is, or the number one question I ask when I hear that is, how's it selling, right? What
Mm.
are you doing to support sales? Because people will say, I just got into Whole Foods. Now I'm going to go raise money, or now I'm going to go get into Sprouts or Wegmans or HEB or whatever. And it's like, don't move on until you're the best selling thing in that store,
Mm.
and that's just effort.
Yeah.
I feel like people make a lot of compromises for growth when it's like, yes, you need to grow, but there's also so many things that you can just like continue to fractionally look into inside of a business. So it's like this balance of you can go so much deeper. You also need to continue to expand. So like, I don't know how you guys have balanced that, but it seems like the toughest problem to solve for in business. Like, I guess that is just like focus, right? Like, where are you spending most of your time trying to grow the business?
Yeah, you're right. Focus and patience,
Yeah.
like, because you could grind on something for a year and go from 100K in sales to 1 million in sales, 10x growth. And you're like, wow, I did it. I'm ready for the national launch. And that's what we did. We had a little hubris in the early years from just growing too quickly for what we thought was too quickly. We did a really good job from the end of 2015 through 2018. We went from $0 in revenue, my brothers and I making deliveries, to 5 million by our third year in business, all in the Northeast, DC, Baltimore, Philly, New York, Boston. And people knew us. Like we were the best selling bottle of coffee in a lot of the stores we went in. We were kicking Starbucks ass head to head, Dunkin's ass head to head. And we said, oh, we went on Shark Tank in 2018. So
Mhm.
like we were getting a little cocky, and investors were starting to throw cash at us. They were like, we need you guys to grow faster. We want bigger valuations. We want to go sell this thing to Coke for $1 billion. So we went from 5 million in the Northeast, launched in Texas and Florida and the Midwest. We went from 5 million to 25 million. And we're like, this thing's working. We're going to go from 25 to 100, 100 to 200. And what we lost sight of is, to your point, it's very easy to grow when you double distribution. If you double distribution, you're going to double revenue. It's also very easy to grow when you double your products. If you go from 2 products to
Mm.
4 products, you're going to double your revenue. So you double distribution, you double revenue, sales go up. But what kind of sales, right? Like, are people buying it again? Are you getting good feedback? Is the repeat rate high? Is gross margin good? That's like a fundamental thing that we had wrong in the early days. So we moved on too quickly, I think, because we wanted to chase that growth and we
Mm.
wanted to get to a point where we could go sell to Coca-Cola
Yeah.
for $1 billion, but we knew we had to be over 100 million in sales to get there. And the fastest way to get there was growth that was unhealthy.
Yeah. Forget if it was like 2019 or 2020. You guys were obviously super on my radar from Mike. I was drinking the product all the time. And I just remember it was like a 6-month span. You guys were getting these insane investors coming on board, whether it was like JLo, ARod, all these other people. And I would have to imagine just being a young founder and having that hyper growth and such success. I'd be curious, like, did that change your mindset or who you were as a person? Or were you just very like mission focused on the task at hand and just didn't really let it affect you too much?
Man, I'd be lying if I said we didn't let the headlines get to our heads.
Yeah.
Like we were on the Forbes under 30 list, was 25-year-olds in 2019. We raised that big round from JLo and ARod in 2020. We raised an even bigger round in 2021, to your point. And this was an era, I don't want to create excuses, but this was an era when WeWork was valued at 40 billion and GoPuff was valued at 47 billion, right? And investors were just throwing cash at these companies that were growing quickly and not making any money.
Mm.
So we thought it was okay to grow without being profitable, because the more we did that, the more money we were able to raise and at higher valuations. And then in 2022, that all sort of shifted, and this whole notion of, hey, to be a good business, you have to be in business, right? You have to be able to make, the business has to make money. So that shifted our mentality. But I would say for 10 years, even before we started Super Coffee, there was this golden age of venture capital where growth was rewarded, disruptive brands were rewarded, and some of them made it out, right? Like some of them it was all or nothing, where you could burn cash and hopefully Keurig Dr. Pepper acquires you, like they did with Bai.
Yeah.
And that was kind of the model. But if there is no buyer for your brand and you're burning cash, you kind of come to the end of the road pretty quick.
Yeah.
How do you see the VC landscape changing in the next 10 years? Like, money's not cheap anymore. So you basically, I mean, you have to be profitable in order to stay alive. You have to have a healthy business. So, like, how are you seeing it change in real time as a CEO of a incredible business?
I think it's a great question. I think that it feels like we're not going to have a big depression, recession, financial crisis, or anything like that. It feels like next year we're slowly going to come out of this. So I don't know if it was painful enough for entrepreneurs and VCs to correct bad habits. So I do think that you'll see companies raise a lot of money at high valuations that don't have viable business models. Um, and I think that entrepreneurs who start great companies that make money, that are disruptive, that are unique in their categories are, if they need to raise money, if they choose to raise money, it will be secondary sales. So it's like, I own 100% of this company. It's super profitable. If you want to invest, you're personally giving me $10 million and I'll give you 10% of the business, right? Like, I think that's kind of what it is. Otherwise, it's like, hey, I'm good. Business cash flowing, like, I'm sorry, Mr. Investor, we don't need you, right? Like, why would we give you anything for this amazing thing that we've built that's paying for itself? It's really hard to do that, right? It's really hard to
Yeah.
build a business that's breaking through like that. But for those who have that leverage, should definitely leverage it.
Yeah. What do you think about this trend of, you see this a lot on Twitter? It's kind of similar to how we started, of like people that choose to build a following before they build a product. And then they actually don't even really need to fundraise. They just kind of, they'll throw some capital at it. They'll test it. They have a big following. The product starts to do well and they kind of bootstrap it. Are you like, if you had to do it over again, like, do you like the bootstrapping approach? Do you like the fundraising approach? Maybe they both have pros and cons, but I'd love to get your take on that.
I think bootstrapping, if you can do it, is great. I think Devin LeVake, who's been on the show, is one of my best friends, business partners at Cedar Trunk Ranch. Everybody sees Devin on Instagram, right? And Devin is one of a kind. Devin's the real deal, right? He's got almost 1 million followers. He's one of the best athletes I know. He's super intense, focused, energetic. And normally when I see guys like Devin who have their hands in 10 different things, I stay away from people like that, because I'm like, this dude doesn't go deep on anything. But Devin makes it all work, right?
Yeah.
He's built the team and the infrastructure around him. And guys like you and me and our friends and our peers that we run with and train with, I feel like are trying to be like Devin, right? But that's to me is, there's only one Devin, right?
Yeah.
There's only one Devin LeVake. So I think if you can create content that is unique to you, go be you, right? To your point about building up a following, go be you, pick your niche, add a lot of value in that niche. Matt Choi, great example. When I met Matt 2 years ago, buddy had like 15,000 followers.
Yeah.
I think he was a coach. He played college football. Like, I don't know what he was doing with his life. And now he is one of the most renowned running influencers in the game because he's put his head down and he built it. But guys like Devin and Matt now have that ability to go reach hundreds of thousands of people that you and I would have to pay tens of thousands of dollars to get in front of. So I'm not, I don't have Devin's personality, right? So I don't think I'm building a big audience anytime soon. But if you have that, and if you can do that, leveraging it into a product or leveraging it into something that you can charge people for, whether it's coaching or subscriptions or advice or books or whatever, I think is definitely the way to go.
What have been some of the biggest unlocks for Super Coffee course of the last 5 years, just in terms of growth?
I think finding where you're winning, understanding where you're winning, like who's buying it, what do they look like, what are their habits, what are they consuming, what other brands are they buying, and going after more of those people. I think we had a very tricky challenge because super coffee is available everywhere now. 50,000 stores from Walmart to 7-Eleven to Whole Foods, very different people. Even in the same banner, right? Like if you're in Whole Foods, the Whole Foods in Springfield, Virginia is very different than the Whole Foods in Foggy Bottom in
Mm.
Washington, D.C. in terms of the people who shop in those stores. So you're not going to get good data unless you actually go deep, figure out who is buying it, do some research on them, and then aggressively go after them, right? If it's a keto audience, tap into those communities on Reddit, on Facebook, on Discord, like go super deep. All of us are so tempted to spend money on Facebook ads and Instagram ads and hit a broad audience, but there's going to be a community where your products do better than other communities. And I bet you have not fully tapped that out yet.
Yeah.
So I think find that and go deep there.
Yeah. I feel like the three of us play off of each other really nicely too, because we're primarily D2C right now. You're primarily retail. And we've been starting to dip our toes in the retail pond, and it's a totally different beast, totally different world. I'm just curious because these buyers, like, they're getting courted by so many different brands every single day. Do you have any like good stories or tactics of how you've been able to get buyers' attention? Like back in the early days when you were just grinding, just trying to get your foot in the door, Mikey calling on his
Aside from
his Acme neighbor, besides
spill
spraying
it.
your super
Yeah.
coffee on a
Right.
painting. Yeah.
I mean, store by store, right? Like control what you can control. You're not going to control the buyer's decision. And to your point, the buyer's not going to make a decision on a brand they've never heard of. So
Yeah.
this was before Amazon owned Whole Foods, and we got into this local program, right? We basically found one store manager who was at the Whole Foods near Georgetown's campus in DC, and we convinced him to give us a shot. We filled out some local paperwork. He gave us 2 facings in the produce cooler. We demoed that day. We broke the store's weekly sales record in like 4 hours. We expanded those 2 facings to 6 facings. And like each week we'd kind of come in and we'd show him love and we'd ask him for reports. He'd pull it out. He's like, "You guys are killing it. You know, you're my
Yeah.
number one item." Like, "Yeah, sure. You can have more space." And then we took that data to the store down the street and we said, "Hey, we're Super Coffee. We're killing it up the street at Whole Foods in Georgetown. Like, please give us the opportunity to do this here." And you just do that on a store by store basis. Stores become chains, right? There's 35. At the time, there was 35 Whole Foods in the Mid Atlantic region. We got into all those. We were the best selling coffee in all those. Took that data to Wegmans, 100 store chain, influential chain in the Northeast. Did the same thing there. There was a point where we were 40% of Wegmans bottled coffee sales, which is crazy, right? Like if you think about
Dude,
Starbucks is
wild.
65% share of the category, and we were the number one item in that 100 store chain. You create those case studies and you take that data, you're able to raise money off of it. You're able to get into new stores because of it. I think having a good idea and a product that tastes good is important, but that's table stakes. You know, people want stuff that sells. And unfortunately, right now, the stuff that sells is usually coming off of Coke trucks and Pepsi trucks and Kellogg's and Nabisco and all the big guys. So a buyer doesn't have any incentive. They have to hit their goals too, right? So they're like, if Starbucks outsells Super Coffee 10-1, guess who's getting 10 times the space as us?
Yeah.
You know, and that's what makes sense. Like, as much as we want this to be in the hands of more people, Starbucks sells better than us, so they're still going to be in more space than we are.
Yeah. Did you find with some of these buyers, like, was your like founding brother story really impactful to them? Like, did that help kind of give you the juice to get in there too? And the reason why I'm saying that is we had a conversation with a huge retailer a couple months ago, and we thought we were like, oh, do we need to put a deck together? Are they going to ask us about all these numbers? And like, not, I mean, it was an intro meeting, so it was very light, but like 90% of the hour and a half that we spent with them was just more so like asking about the podcast, our founder story. Like that was what really resonated. So I'm just curious if that was what it was like for you.
It depends on the buyer.
Yeah.
Right? Buyers are humans, you know, and like you get into Walmart and there's very strict rules. They can't take gifts. They can't take free goods. You know, they're very strict with
Yeah.
time allotted to vendors. You know, it's a very regimented thing. But every now and then you'll get somebody who heard you on the podcast or heard you on Nick Bear and follows you on Instagram and wants to work out. You know, like those are always great. So I think in certain areas it helped us a lot, and others I think our age was a disadvantage,
Mm.
right? Like buyers want the path of least resistance. They don't want to have to deal. They don't want to have to teach somebody how to do paperwork. They don't want to have to deal with late shipments or stuff like that. And a lot of times in the early days, and even now, sometimes we were kind of sloppy with that stuff, and it cost us. You know, it cost us meetings. It cost us opportunities to get in. And then once you get in, like making sure you can supply all the stores, you have distribution coverage. We should chat offline about this move into retail because I think
Yeah.
stick with D2C as long as you can.
Yeah.
Real. Yeah, it seems like the retail game brings on a lot more like relationship management and just like operational management, administrative work, things that like kind of slow businesses down when it comes to just or like just takes away from your focus, right? Like you only have so many hours in the day. So it's a good point. I feel like for us, we were like always very focused on just building out the best D2C business. And then literally our first day of having product, sampling product was at KetoCon in Austin. And the buyer from Central Market just walked up to us at our Noble booth. She's like, I've been looking for this type of product for like months. So excited to meet you guys. We just connected with her. So it's cool to be testing it out retail right now and just seeing like how it's going. It's gone well so far, but I think for anyone listening who's like should, I'm starting something, I'm thinking like retail, it's definitely something that is a way bigger commitment than I think everyone gives it credit for.
Yeah, totally. I mean, think it's super hard to get a product to show up on time every time at 50,000 stores every single week. And not just getting it from your warehouse to the distributor's warehouse to the stores themselves, but getting it from the back room to the shelves, and I mean, there's times where you go walk into HEB down the street and you just see an empty super coffee shelf, right? And we have a sales rep. She does an amazing job, but she can't hit that store every week,
Right.
Yeah.
and I think that's great, especially if it's controlled. Because
Yeah.
what you guys have to get good at is saying no to people, right?
Mm.
Like in those early years when we were building Super Coffee, we were just getting into Wegmans, just getting that going. Ralph's, a regional chain in Southern California, hit us up and was like, "Hey, we'd love to have Super Coffee out here." This was year 3. It was just me and my brothers and Mikey, and we were like, "Sorry, we can't support that." It'd be
Mm.
great. We'd double our revenue. We'd be on both coasts. That'd be awesome, but we don't wanna put product on a shelf 3,000 miles away from where we're at and bet what happens. Because 'cause I'm telling you, without us in those stores, it's not gonna go well.
Yeah. That's crazy. So I'm sure you eventually probably got in there, right? You just waited.
Yeah, yeah, we
Yeah.
waited, and people, like, respect that,
Yeah.
buyers respect that, I think, especially if you have really strong data, the stronger your data, the more leverage you have and the more ability you have to say no to people and also say yes when you're ready to say yes.
Yeah.
The other thing about D2C is you have all the data, right?
Yeah.
You know everything about that person.
Do you think that if you guys launch now, you could have a way bigger D2C business?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, beverage is tough, right? Like, you can't really sell we sell Super Coffee on Amazon for 36 bucks, $3 a bottle.
Mm.
Any more than that, it gets unreasonable to pay, and on that, our cost of goods with Amazon fees and shipping is probably, I don't know, close to $30, right? So, like, we're making 6 bucks a case. It's it's fine, but you can't really pay the bills with that, and it's the same reason why Coke and Pepsi and Dr. Pepper don't have big Amazon businesses because they control the supply chain, they control the distribution, and their margins when they sell in stores are a lot higher than what it would be online.
Yeah. The RTD space is fascinating, just like the things that companies go through to make the product shelf stable. We're huge fans of Jocko, and Squatch carries Jocko Mulk here.
Mm.
And I was looking through the ingredients. I'm like, this product looks awesome. And there was like vegetable oil was listed as ingredient number 4 or 5. And I'm just like, dude, why do you have to put vegetable oil in this? There's so many other alternatives. Do you think that we're going to continue to see this seed oil free trend continue in like this healthy food space and more companies are going to make that commitment like Sweet Green to pull some of this stuff out of their products?
I hope so, man. I hope so. I just saw it today. There's a guy you guys should follow, Ryan Lowry,
Mm.
Dr. Ryan Lowry, big keto guy out
Mm.
down in Florida. He's awesome. And he was like the biggest mistake McDonald's made in the last 20 years is in the 90s. They switched from frying their fries in beef tallow
Yeah.
to canola oil. And I'm like, I mean, look, it's so much cheaper, right? Like MCT oil is freaking expensive and we put
Yeah.
it in every single bottle. So I hope so, right? Vegetable oil to me and seed oils are on the same level of danger as added sugars,
Yeah.
excessive amounts of sugars.
Yeah.
But people just don't realize that. And the problem is it tastes good. People buy what tastes good.
Mm.
Yeah. And from a cost standpoint for the businesses, it's cheaper, you
It's
know.
cheaper. Yeah. I mean, to have a product that's juiced up with MCT oil or olive oil and sweeteners like monk fruit and grass-fed protein or an organic coffee, you'd need to charge 6 or 7 bucks a bottle just to have the margin you need to survive. And you could do that in some place. You could do that at Central Market. You could do that at Erewhon, but you can't do that at Walmart, you
It's
know?
pretty cool seeing in Austin, Zeke Kitchens just announced that they're going back to beef tallow in their fryers, and then True Foods is getting rid of seed oils. So it's like, I think the trend is here. It's just, I don't know, how far does it go beyond, and you said Sweet Green too. So how far does it go beyond, just Austin?
Yeah, I mean, here's the humbling thing we've learned and the sad thing we've learned over the last few years is, like, there's a community that listens to this podcast, that eats our products and drinks our products, that is they want to be 1% better every day, right? And even if it doesn't taste good, they're taking it, right? They want to optimize themselves, and it's the people we run with. So it's like we're kind of in an echo chamber, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty loud. But when we put Super Coffee in 6,500 7-Elevens
Mm.
last year and 4,200 Walmarts, you're like, dang, these people want something that tastes good and is cheap, right? Like I'd be at a demo. I'll never forget this. I was doing a demo at Walmart in Arkansas in 2020, peak of COVID. I don't know how they let me. I think it was merchandising. And this lady drives by on a rascal scooter. She's probably 400 pounds. She had her mask on her chin whiskers everywhere, smoking a cigarette in the
Yeah.
Walmart with a 24 pack of Coke in her cart. And I was like, I'm supposed to explain to this lady why monk fruit is good.
Yeah.
Like that's just
No
not
chance.
that's not happening, right? And I don't blame her, right? Those
Yeah.
are her means, and that's what she's on a budget. She's gonna buy what tastes good, and she can afford. And the sad thing is that's most of this country. So I think we have yes, there's good trends happening, and we have a long way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, in our community, there's like this implication that if a big food company buys like a smaller, healthy brand, that's inherently a bad thing, which is interesting. And I think when I didn't fully know the research, I thought that too. And then we had Mark Sisson on from Primal Kitchen, and he was like, we asked him that question. He was like, you guys like Primal Kitchen, obviously. You want your parents having access to it. You want the mainstream having access to it. Well, it's like because we sold to craft, it's like we're able to get into Costco and some of these other big box retailers. So I never thought about it from a distribution perspective before of how like if you actually get the right strategic partner, maybe that is how we make some of this stuff more mainstream. And I'm curious your thoughts on that too.
Totally. No, that's right. And people ask us all the time, like, will you ever sell out? It's not selling out, right? It's what Mark said. It's one, we have a fiduciary responsibility to investors. People put money into the company, expect to make more money from that
Yeah.
over a certain amount of time. There's two ways to do that is to go public, to sell to a strategic. And for us, selling to a strategic makes a lot of sense because it gives us reach that we can't get on our own. It gets us into stores that we can't get. Like we're in 50,000 stores, sounds like a lot. Coca-Cola services over 300,000 accounts,
Mm,
right? They sell to freaking barbershops, like you'll never see Super Coffee in a barbershop unless I'm bringing it there by hand.
yeah.
So there's certainly reach that comes with deals like that, so long as the product stays true and the integrity of what's inside it stays true.
You mentioned your brothers, and I'm curious, you guys were talking about selling, and you also mentioned like some of your first hires. How have you guys gone about like early on, early days? How'd you guys go about like bringing people on to create the culture that you guys wanted to? And follow-up question, did you guys find it hard to bring people on who weren't intimidated by, like, the brother dynamic? Because I feel like having such a core, I mean, blood is, as thick as you can get in terms of trust and everything, so it's like, it is probably hard for people to, like, come in and feel like they're being heard and all that, so just curious to get your take on how you guys built things out.
Yeah, it's a great question, man, and it's certainly evolved over time. I think we are 3 young white males, right? That's our genes,
Yeah.
that's our family, and I think we all played sports in college, so, uh, hiring our teammates was inevitably people that looked like us, and people who wanted to run hard with us. We liked hiring teammates because we've already interviewed them for 4 years when it was 4th and goal in November, and they were sticking their face into the guy to get you into the end zone to win the game, right? Like,
Right.
that's who we hired. I
Yeah.
didn't care if they could sell anything. It's like, who do I want to have my back? All I know is this is hard, right? Like
Yeah.
what we're doing is difficult. I don't know what questions to ask somebody in an interview back in 2016. I don't know what skills I'm looking for. I just know I need somebody who's going to hustle, who's going to outwork, who's going to put in time, who's going to solve problems on their own without being told what to do. And we hired a lot of the people who had our backs in football and basketball and the weight room and all that. And I say a lot, like that was probably the team for the first 10 to 15 folks. And then we had a little culture, a team culture. It felt like an actual college sports team. So we attracted female athletes who were into that.
Mhm.
Our old CMO won 4 national championships on Maryland's women's lacrosse. She worked at Under Armour for 20 years. Like she was badass. And then I think in 2020 it really opened our eyes to like, hey, we need to be intentional about who we hire. We need
Yeah.
to bring diverse perspectives. We sell our products in every community across the country, and we need people who come from these communities on this team. So I think diversity became a thing at scale, 25 people plus. We implemented diverse hiring practices, recruiting from historically all black colleges, uh, interviewing a certain number of underrepresented candidates for each
Mm.
role was important for us. And then I think one thing we may still be blind to is running hard in a direction that we've sort of validated by not just us and and success we've had in small accounts, but feedback from guys and gals who have come before us specific to the beverage industry. Inch wide, mile deep, going direct store delivery to stores rather than through UNFI, stuff that we knew worked really well. When people who came in that didn't have that background, if we didn't listen to them, they felt like they weren't being heard. And they were like, "Oh, those brothers are too hard-headed. Like my experience or advice isn't needed here." And in some cases that's probably true. In other cases, it's like this is the way to do it.
Yeah.
It's hard, it's a fist fight, it's not for everybody. Like, and this isn't Coke or Pepsi, right? Like we've hired amazing people from big companies that they have very different problems to solve. Our problem is, will our distributor put our product on the shelf that day? Whereas at Pepsi, that answer is probably yes. And the problems they solve are, what can I do to market that product off of the shelf? Like we're trying to literally get on the shelf, and people are coming in with solutions of what happens when your product is already there. So I think that's been tricky, is taking advice and implementing that advice, versus trusting our guts and what's worked historically.
Yeah. It's cool that those first 10 to 15 hires were close friends that you really trusted, because hiring friends is tough. It's like a double-edged sword where if you nail it, you're like, I've got this person that I trust as much as blood, like Harry mentioned, which is amazing. And the downside is there probably are people that will come maybe like justify their lack of performance. Like, come on, dude, we're friends. So I'm just curious how you kind of delineate between like friend mode and work mode.
Yeah, it's a great question, man, and it's always uncomfortable, right? There's no elegant way to do it. We actually call it elegant conflict, but you set parameters and expectations, right? So, like, we have coach principles, like our values are captured by this
Mhm.
acronym called coach. It's like we want every employee to be curious, optimistic, like never negative, never pessimistic, ambitious, compassionate, treat everybody with love and respect, and then humble. So those are our values, and each person is graded by those values. So if you step outside of line, if you're not ambitious, if you're not optimistic, if you're being arrogant or self-centered, like we can measure you against what you signed up for. So that's important to have some type of measuring stick for the people you
Mm.
bring on, but also being direct. Like there was a time I'll never forget it, and I hope he listens to this. But Hunter Kislick, one of our best friends, we're hosting his bachelor party in a couple weeks. He was the captain of the Georgetown football team.
Mhm.
Played with my brother Jake. Amazing sales rep. He's still with us today, runs the biggest book of business in the company, and has a great team. His distributors love him. His accounts love him. But in like 2018, my brothers and I had to sit him down and said, Hunter, this isn't the Hunter show, right? Like you're out here doing things for what's best for you. You're making plays, but often at the expense of the teammates around you. And having that conversation with him was super uncomfortable for the three of us. I'm sure it was uncomfortable for him, but it changed the way we worked together,
Mm.
and it changed his mentality about what it means to be on this team.
Mm.
So it's very easy not to have that conversation.
Yeah.
So I guess the guidance is, once you feel it, have that conversation ASAP
Yeah.
before, because if it festers and gets too long, you can't have that conversation anymore.
Yeah.
The damage becomes irreparable.
Yeah.
There's like a statute of limitations on like that conversation. It's like if you let it happen and ferment and just like hang around for too long, it's just like we missed our window.
Yeah, totally, totally.
And I feel like life as CEO is just like constant difficult conversations, right? Do you feel like you really hardened that muscle a lot the last 5 to 6 years?
Yeah, I think I'm just a overly compassionate person, which is sometimes
Mm.
a sign of weakness. But I quickly address feedback and performance. I don't let that linger. I think we could do a better job of setting a culture of high performance. Like we've all played on teams with old school coaches who don't tolerate any nonsense.
Yes.
And I think that we've gotten away from that a little bit. The broader and more diverse the team has become, and inevitably you will. But I think goal setting is also critical into holding people accountable. Because to your point, if your buddy comes to you and he's like, come on, dude, we're boys. It's like, well, I've been telling you for 3 months that you've been underperforming, not only on cases sold, accounts visited, but just activity. Like you're not putting in the time that your partner is. Look at your partner, he's smashing his goals
Yeah.
and you're missing yours. Right.
Yeah.
So I think any benchmark or measuring stick you can institute holds people accountable objectively.
Mhm.
Yeah.
At what point did you guys start thinking about culture? Like, obviously, the first hire you're thinking about like who we want to bring on. It's going to be really important to the DNA of the company. But like, when did you guys implement the coach strategy or philosophy around the business.
So culture is always an extension of the people who work there, right? And it's an extension of personalities. For us, that was multiplied by 3
Mm.
because we all grew up in the same house with mom and dad, sort of teaching us. Our mom's mentality was kick today's ass. My dad dropped me off at Pop Warner football practice, my first all pads practice when I was 8 years old, and he said, "Be the first person to the water cooler."
Mm.
And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Hustle in between the lines, but hustle off the field too." And that kind of set the tone for what is acceptable. You know, that's the standard is hustling on and off the field. So that's kind of what we exuded into the world, and the type of people we attracted was just by being us. Coach helped define the way we all behaved. I think another important piece. So coach didn't come around until 2019. I
Okay.
would say 4 years in,
Mm.
we finally codified it, and we had a commitment to trust early on, where we set down rules of like, if you need to deliver feedback to somebody who's underperforming, here's how you're going to do it. And I can share this stuff with you guys to link out, because I do think that some level of these principles and practices is important early on. Um, and I think so. Culture is not only an extension of the people; it's also what you tolerate, right? So the moment that you set a standard and you allow somebody to break it, that's the moment that you're saying you don't care about those values or
Yeah.
that culture, and that's a tough thing. So you really have to, if you see somebody not living up to it, you have to take action swiftly.
Mm. It's always fascinating having on founders because it's fun to just learn about the things that make them excited or what them tick about business. You know, there's some people that love sales and relationships. There's some people that love digging deep into the numbers. Like we had Wyatt on from Ice Barrel. He just loves being all in on the numbers, which was interesting. I'm curious for you, like, what are the things about business that get you the most juiced or most excited? Like, what are you doing that makes you feel your best?
Yeah, man. Oh, it's so good. I think coming up with ways to tell stories and create content that breaks through
Mm,
and tells a story. So like a couple years ago, we said, hey, for every bottle of super coffee we've sold over the years, if that's one bottle of Starbucks that's not sold, how much sugar have we removed from America's diet,
mm,
right? So, like, visualizing it that way and showing impact, like, at first it was 5 million, then 10 million pounds, now 25 million pounds. It's like, that's 100 swimming pools. That's 75 dump trucks. So, like, coming up with these visualizations of how to tell a story of
yeah.
impact and why things matter was super important. We've been having a lot of fun this year shooting content of how much sugar is in products on the shelf. You know, like, the worst stuff is like condiments and creamers, where it is very small servings, like a 1 tablespoon serving, but there's 65 servings in a little bottle.
Mm,
There could be 300 grams of sugar in a bottle of creamer or a tube of ketchup, you know? So I think showing people what that looks like. This isn't tomatoes that you're buying, right? This is mostly sugar and high fructose corn syrup.
yeah. And that shift in your mental model is so impactful for you personally, I would imagine, because now you're making this mental shift of like, I'm not just trying to build this badass brand that does a bunch of revenue. Like I'm actually making people healthier the more that we sell this product. So that actually motivates you to do your job better too.
Yeah, totally. And that's the fun thing. I think what we've learned, and you guys have a great tasting product. I'll say it over and over again, is what tastes good to us might not taste good to the people in Arkansas riding the rascal scooters around Walmart, right? So I think finding ways to constantly improve. Like if we're asking somebody to be healthy, we don't want them to compromise their flavor, right?
Mm,
Like I don't want somebody to say, yeah, I get that I shouldn't have that much sugar, but this Starbucks Frappuccino tastes way better than that super coffee, so that's what I'm going to have. So I think finding ways to get super coffee to taste like the mainstream has been imperative as well. And
mm,
the better we can get at that, and we get better every 6 months, every year,
yeah.
we're improving the formula. The larger impact we can have.
Mm,
One of the things I was curious about is just like the skills that I just think entrepreneurship is this amazing reflection or mirror into yourself, and you're constantly developing new skills, but you're kind of uncovering skills that you didn't realize that you had. And I think about Brett and myself, we started writing online, literally have never written before. And that was like the catalyst for us starting the podcast and really actually have built a business around writing online. So that was like kind of the skill set that we like uncovered over the last 2 years that we didn't
mm.
really realize that we had. Do you have an example of that, like where you were like, "Oh, I didn't even think that I would be able to do that," but yeah, here I am, amazing at doing this, and now I apply like some skill that's valuable.
It's great. It's a great anecdote, and I think that there is no. I'm not great at anything, unfortunately. I haven't found my newsletter yet or my online writing channel.
It's coming.
But I do think that there is a mental barrier for people who see the Ben Greenfields and Lewis Howes and even Devin LeVakes and even you guys now, or read the newsletters from Tim Ferriss or the Morning Brew or the Hustle or whatever. Say, I can't do that. I could never do that. And so they never start. And I'm sure you guys found that once you started, it's like you have to be passionate about something. And once you go deep into that passion, as you share what you realize that other people are passionate about it too. And you make things digestible. Ryan Holiday's a great example. Right down the street in Bastrop, this dude took ancient philosophy. I was a philosophy major in college, and that shit is boring, right? It's
Yeah.
a different language. He took it and he made it modern. He made it popular. He made it digestible. And that's what you guys are doing with what you write about, and that's what we're trying to do with health and nutrition. In our early days, Super Coffee was all about protein and MCT oil. Then we realized that America doesn't know what MCT oil is. Yeah. We're like, hey, this is not our job to educate Americans on what MCT oil is, but we need them to consume a lot of this. So let's focus on flavor. Let's focus on energy. Let's focus on low sugar, like
Mhm.
stuff that was much more relevant. I think making complex ideas simple has been my focus. I'm not great at it yet, but that's kind of been it through storytelling, through analogy. I think analogy is super important. Like, I don't know, this is the Airbnb of hotel. Like
Right.
whatever
Yeah.
example you can give that's familiar to people is really how you get them to change their perspective on what you're selling.
Yeah, I think you are the embodiment of what Harry was talking about. It's like you were you were an investment banking analyst before starting Super Coffee, right? So I'm sure there was the imposter syndrome around like, all right, now I'm going to go be the CEO of this like startup coffee company. Like, what do I know about this stuff? And you just figure it out and you get it done.
Totally, yeah, imposter syndrome's super real, but by taking action, like, that's the solution, right? That's the solution to depressed thoughts, that's the
Yeah.
solution to pessimism. It's like taking action and chipping away. We say, "How do you move a mountain?" It's just one stone at a time, and it's just day after day after day of moving stones. Pretty soon you'll be pretty impressed by the pile you build.
Yeah.
How have you seen your athletic background helping you in the business world? Because I mean, both of us played baseball in college, playing sports. I legitimately don't know how entrepreneurs who haven't played a sport get through like being able to actually have grit and like hang in there and just like take defeat day after day and like work for that 1% day where you actually have a win is like the only context I can think where that happens in your youth is in sports. So I'm curious like how you've seen your sports background actually help you in entrepreneurship.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. I'm sure you guys resonate, but it's like I've never been on a team that has gone undefeated, right? We lose every
Mhm.
year, and as a football player, we had even less games. We had 12 games a year. And in January, I played football at Colgate up in Hamilton, New York. There was 3 feet of snow on the ground. It was cold. You're marching through the snow to go into this like luminescent, like orange field house and run sprints on old turf until your knees were bleeding in January for games that you were going to play in November. Like that, there's a certain amount of discipline. Like you're putting in the time for something that happens in the future. I think building was important. Teamwork, right? We all played team sports. So like being one person on a team and knowing your role and knowing how that contributes, dealing with defeat, right? Putting in all of that work in the off season and then going 5-7, like that sucks. But bouncing back and understanding that if you work harder the next year, you're going to be in a better position to win. So, I mean, sports have been invaluable. Um, and I think I know some great students who have that work ethic too. I was not a great student,
Yeah.
so I put my time and effort and energy into sports, and I think I got some valuable lessons out of that.
Yeah. Do you feel like business in some ways reminds you of the purity of competition that you had playing college sports or no? And the reason why I'm saying that is I've always really just struggled to find that purity. Probably what we're doing now is the closest I've ever gotten to it. I never found it in a corporate job, probably just because we're like just so all in on what we're doing now. And I'm curious, how you feel about that for yourself.
Yeah, I think I'm always going to be competitive, right? But Simon Sinek has a book called Infinite Games, and sports are finite games. There's a winner, there's a loser, there's rules, there's points, there's a time. Football game 60 minutes. After that clock strikes zero, there's a winner and a loser. Business is an infinite game. There is no winner or loser, right? There is no time, there's no rules. You're not playing against anybody, so it's not that purity, right? That's
Mhm.
not it's not clear. So I think bringing the mentality of what it takes to win a finite game into an infinite game is challenging because you're playing one way on a field that looks a lot different than the rules that you're used to. I think it's good, I don't think that in order for us to win, Starbucks needs to lose. I
Yeah.
think there's going to be multiple winners in every category.
Mm.
Yeah.
How do you approach just day to day, like keeping up with your health? Like you and your brothers are fitness guys, like doing the thing in the business world, but it's so easy to let that stuff slip when you don't have that much time. You're spending so much time building the business. So, like, what does the day to day look like?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's never as good or as bad as it seems, right? I think understanding that is super important. This too shall pass, right? Like I think being in business, yes, it's challenging. Yes, it's super hard and stressful. It's great problems to have.
Mm.
Building a cool company with my brothers and people that I love. We're serving millions of people every single year. Like we have high valuations. We have a lot of expectations from investors who aren't happy with us always, especially this in a year like this. And I think understanding that those are first class problems is important
Mhm.
perspective. So having perspective on everything, it's not the end of the world. And then the fitness component is we were talking about this before we went on air. The harder I train, the better I show up at work,
Mhm.
at school, at anything, and that is something that's difficult, right? Because it's very easy to sleep in past the alarm or not set an alarm and roll into the office whenever you want to. But I think if I wake up on the days where I wake up and grind and put in that time or set a goal, whether it's a marathon or a weight goal or a race or anything like that, it gives me something to work towards
Mhm.
outside of work and kind of keeps me energized while at work.
Speaking of racing, 3-hour marathon?
3 hour and 1 second. We can't
Dude,
forget that 1 second.
dude, that's unbelievable. So did you always have this crazy endurance engine, or is it just something you discovered after school? Because obviously football, you're sprinting, you're not really doing long distance. Like what was that endurance transition like for you?
Yeah, so, I mean, I think I've had a good engine. I was a fast sprinter, I was strong in the weight room, but running was never a thing, right? It was
Yeah.
punishment for football players and baseball players. And a couple years ago, like, running 5 miles was as far as I ever went. I had 0 ambition or aspiration to run a marathon. I wasn't interested in it, bad for my body. I'd rather be strong and versatile. People call it the hybrid athlete, like, I'd rather be in that type of shape. But then my fiance ran track in college. She's been running more races. And there's like, and you guys know this, running marathons is like, you unlock this so much mental potential
Mhm.
the moment you pass a barrier, right? For me, when I was stuck at 5 miles, running a half marathon was impossible.
Mhm.
Once I ran a half marathon, running a marathon seemed impossible. Once I started training for a marathon, running 13 miles became easy, and that was a thing that was impossible 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And now I ran 2 marathons this year. My first one ever was Austin in February, 3 hours and 1 second. And then
You
I
literally
ran it
can't make
back
that
in
up.
I can't make it up. I ran it back in November in New York City, and I was like, "I'm gonna break 3 hours in New York. I'm gonna train for it. I'm gonna be ready to go." Official time, 3 hours and 1 second,
Dude.
which is unbelievable. Um, but
Consistent.
yeah, the training for New York, even though it was less than a year apart, was so much easier for me mentally. It's like I can go do a 20-mile long run on the weekends, and I ran a much better race in New York. My heart rate was chiller. It was harder on my legs. Um, but it just these mental barriers change when you do things that you think you can't.
Mm.
What
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, what do you think about these guys who are running 100 milers plus? Like we met a guy. We were up at Steve Weatherford's place in Dallas, and his like right hand man is doing like 200 milers. It's like it's unbelievable. Like over 5 days. It's crazy.
It's crazy, man. It's a different type of athlete, right? And we know a lot of them, right? Jesse Itzler, Chad Wright, this guy, Lewis just broke, or Harvey Lewis just broke the
Mhm.
record for consecutive mile. He ran 450 miles a couple weeks ago. It's crazy.
Where do you run?
It was a 3-mile course or 4-mile course. So, and it was every hour on the hour. So if you finish in 30 minutes, you could rest for 30 minutes. But you can imagine after mile 100, these dudes were finishing with seconds to go, minutes to go, and they just get back on the line and start. It's the last man standing race. Um, Badass. I couldn't imagine doing that. Like feet are broke. It's a different thing than running a marathon hard or running a 5K hard. And like in my competitive mind, I'm like, I'm gonna go run a 3-hour marathon. Those guys can't do that, right? I'm gonna go run as hard as I can. I'm gonna go run a 5K and
Mhm.
set a PR in the 5K this weekend, and those guys can't do that. That is my way of saying I can't run 100 miles, or I'm not interested in running 100 miles.
Yeah.
Whatever it is. I mean, kudos to them, man. That is a superhuman feat.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like these guys that do those ultra endurance races are just mental sages.
Yeah.
Like I remember seeing Jesse posting about Chad the first time I discovered Chad, and he was just telling Jesse, he's like, we never get tired. Like that was like their mantra. I'm like, why don't I reaffirm that stuff throughout my day-to-day life? Or just saying those like positive, encouraging things, but there's all these nuggets that you can pull out of the brain of someone like that.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I've gone to a couple of Chad's leadership lessons in the backcountry this year, and it was amazing. Like he's the real deal, and it's just mental fortitude. No excuses, no negotiating. It is just pure mental strength. And that anecdote that you're talking about, when Jesse was trying to train for his first 100 miler, he hired Chad. Chad was like, Jesse, whenever I ask you how you're feeling, you're going to tell me outstanding. Even if you
Mm.
don't, you're going to answer with outstanding. Mile 30, mile 50, mile 70. And that's how it went. So I ran the New York Marathon a couple weeks ago with my two brothers, and I said, boys, this is going to be hard. We're going to do
Yeah.
this together. It's going to be a once in a lifetime thing. I can't wait to do this with you guys. If I ask you how you're feeling, you're going to tell me outstanding. And we ripped the first half marathon. We were like flying through Brooklyn. Crowds were electric. We probably ran like 6:30s through the first half marathon. And mile 8, Jake, how we feeling? Outstanding. Mile 10, how we feeling? Outstanding. Mile 14, outstanding. We get on the Queensboro Bridge, coming up the 59th Street Bridge, coming into New York City. I'm like, Jake, how you feeling? He's a couple steps behind. Nothing. Dude was gone. He just fell off. Never saw him again.
Yeah.
Cramped up. I'm sure if he heard me, he would have said outstanding.
Yeah.
But we were freaking hurting, man. It was a fun race, but that mental block is everything. If you have a positive mentality, and that's why optimism is one of our core values.
Mm.
If you're a negative person or have a pessimistic attitude, you're going to stop.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't have to do this. My feet hurt, my legs hurt, my heart hurts. Like first of all, nobody cares that you run a marathon.
Yeah.
That's
No.
between you and you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Were the hills in New York harder or Austin?
Austin probably had more hills, but the way that New York is structured, like the last 10K feels like all uphill. Coming up Fifth Avenue, mile 23, 24 into Central Park, super hilly. And I was on pace at that point. It wasn't until I got to like mile 25 and a half on 59th Street heading toward like Columbus Circle where it's flat. I was like, I looked at my watch. I was like, if you empty the tank, it's going to get close.
Yeah.
And it sure was close.
Dude, those hills in Central Park are no joke.
Oh, brutal, dude.
Do you run the hills in Central Park in the marathon?
Yeah.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. There's
Is
like
that why
2
you were
miles.
asking?
Yeah, that's what I was asking.
2 miles in Central Park. But Austin's great for hills. And honestly, like if I'm not training for anything, I run hills. I think the best workout that anybody listening can do is go sprint up a hill. That's the fastest way to get your heart rate up. It's the fastest way to burn out your legs. Like if you choose one exercise between now and forever, run hills.
There's a workout that's gotten popular on Twitter. It's not running hills, but it's set the treadmill at 3 miles an hour and then set it to 15 degrees and just walk for like 30 minutes. It's called the Drew.
It's like a Dre walk
Dre
or
walk.
something like that.
Yeah, but you get an insane, like I sweat so much just doing that. It's like low intensity cardio, but like any incline is gonna like get you ripped up.
Yeah. You sweat so much. That's right. But that's a brutal workout, man.
Yeah, not to transition back to the business stuff, but I meant to ask you this question because I've never asked you this before. What are the realistic downsides of being a CEO that most people don't talk about?
That's a great question. I feel like there's a lot.
Which one to choose?
Yeah.
What's the quote? Like heavy is the head that wears the crown or whatever. I
Yeah.
feel like that's so true.
Yeah, you don't realize that until you're in that situation, right? Because as much as I want to be a peer and a friend to everybody I work with and learn from the people I work with, like the moment you're at the top is the moment that people treat you differently, right? And an executive coach said to us once, like, people don't want to have drinks with the CEO. They want to have one beer and go home, and I think as a human, that's a lonely place to be, right? You never really see people's true colors. Everybody's kind of performing around you and having an act around you. So I think that's kind of been a lonely thing. I think heavy lies the crown, right? You can do everything right, but if the business is wrong or not performing, that's on you, and I think that's what we sign up for. That's why we do this. I think overcoming imposter syndrome, constantly questioning, like, am I the right person for this is super challenging. I've seen a therapist every week on Monday. Saw my boy Rick today, once a week for the last 3 years. That's been transformative and super helpful. I feel like tough guys, especially athletes, don't talk about that stuff enough, and I wish we did, because having a super smart therapist helps, but like being able to do this with you guys or my peers who are going through similar things matters a lot. I think another thing that is tricky that people don't talk about is, you quickly no longer have anything in common with your friends.
Mm.
Mm.
And that's sad, right? You see your boys who you played college football with going to weddings without you, going to bachelor parties without you. You're not in the group text anymore. And not because they think you're a bad person. It's just you're doing different things, right? You're on a
Yeah.
different level. It's like when you're 25 years old and you've been running the company for 3 years, you're kind of like a 40-year-old dude, and
Mhm.
your friends are going to happy hour. And for some of those people, you don't want to be friends with, right?
Yeah.
That's not the mentality, or that's not the lifestyle that you chose. But for others, like, your circle gets a lot smaller. So I think that's an interesting challenge too that you don't really know about before you get started.
Yeah. Do you feel like you're able to open up to your brothers about some of this stuff, or is it kind of that big brother thing where like I just got to shoulder this shit and I don't need to tell them everything?
Um, I wish we talked more. We for a while we were getting breakfast every Monday morning before work. We see each other every day. We
Yeah.
live within a half a mile from each other. But it's a lot of times it's just hanging out. It's working out, it's watching football, it's getting a meal. But rarely talking about how we feel. I think we've kind of gotten calloused to the challenges. So like we now do what we have to do in
Mm.
terms of making a tough decision, doing a layoff, or right sizing spends, discontinuing products. Doing those types of things is, I don't know, it's become second nature to us, but that's hard. Like when you fire somebody, my brother had to fire somebody today, and for a performance issue, like I should call him and be like, "How are you doing?
Yeah.
Like how are you feeling?" And we should have that conversation, but we're probably not gonna.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
You mentioned the coach. You guys had a executive coach, and it's the thing that I feel like I've learned the most over the biggest mistake I think I made entering the working world was just not continuing to seek out a coach. Like I had a boss, but it's so much different than a coach. And I'm curious, was that something you guys started doing at Super Coffee early on, or something a little bit later?
2019, so 25 million-ish in sales, 50 employees, just raised a round, wanted to level up and elevate the game because like there's a different skill set between being a founder entrepreneur and being a CEO executive leader. So I think trying to sharpen those skills and see blind spots and learn, like, the benefit of a good coach is they talk to 20 other leaders every single day
Yeah.
who are facing the same problems that you face. I think one thing that I haven't wrapped my head around, and I don't wanna kick a dog trying to get its bone, but I see a lot of coaches out there,
Yeah.
and I'm like, what have you done to teach me?" And I don't want, again, I don't like, people are out there doing their thing. I'm sure they know a lot, and I'm sure they learn a lot, but if somebody hasn't built what I'm trying to build, I'm probably not gonna work with them, and, like, I want them to have built something much bigger than my aspirations
Yeah.
so I can learn from them, right? Like, if somebody had a profitable company that they sold 10 million revenue, now they're coaching on the side, like, sure, we can chat, we can get coffee, but, like, I'm not gonna pay you to give me advice every week.
Yeah.
So and coaching is kinda like mentorship and kinda like dating, right? There needs to be compatibility there. You need to find somebody who you vibe with, somebody who understands you, and that's hard. I think that's why people don't get started with therapists, because
Mm.
finding a good one is a difficult thing.
That's actually a really good piece of advice is asking yourself, like, is this coach, like, were they in the shoes that I eventually want to be in at some point? Right. Because it's like there are these coaches that can brand themselves super well. They can sell, they're great with people, but can they actually relate to the things that you're going through or not?
Totally,
Yeah.
totally, yeah, and the same challenges because there's mnemonic devices and different tools that you can deploy, but, like, in college, my quarterback coach, I got recruited as a quarterback. I ended up playing running back for 4 years. My quarterback coach played a tight end at a D3 school, and he was a brilliant X's and O's offensive coordinator. But it's like, dude, don't tell me where my elbow needs to be when I throw this
Yeah.
ball, right? Like, don't tell me where my feet need to be when I'm rolling out with a defensive end hanging off my shoulder,
Yeah.
like, so I think that finding somebody who you look up to and respect and who has done it is
Yeah.
critical. Charlie Munger passed away last week, and one of
Mm.
his things is like you have to look up to, admire, and respect your boss.
Yeah.
Like, don't work for anybody you don't admire or respect. And I think that is super important with coaching and advice and mentors too.
Yeah, Harry's point is interesting. It's like you grow up, you play sports, coaches are so crucial and fundamental, and then you just get spit out into the real world and no one tells you that you should be working with a coach or trying to sharpen that axe. It's just something I think about all the time.
Yeah, and I think as entrepreneurs, you kind of have to fill those voids and seek out advice and mentors and all that. But it's brutal, right? Like you go from having teachers and coaches and parents and bosses and advisors and counselors and all of this around you to having none of that as an entrepreneur. And I think it's lonely. I think it's disruptive for athletes. I'm sure you guys know Corey Camp. He's doing great stuff with Forever Athlete,
Yeah.
but we all feel this way, and I think it's the ones who push forward anyway and the ones who make it work on their own are the ones that break out, right?
Mhm.
It's the ones who wait for somebody to tell them what to do are the ones who will always be waiting.
Yeah.
Mhm. You mentioned Jesse Itzler. Is that someone you've sought out for, like, mentorship? I'm sure he gives like, I've been on calls with him and, just, like, listened to a ton of his content, and his advice is always, I feel like, pretty spot on. He just keeps it real, so curious if he's one of the people you've sought out for mentorship and anyone else that you've kinda tapped on, 'cause I mean, it is, like you guys are saying, like, it's something you need to seek out. It's not just gonna, like, land in your
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's important. I think showing up to somebody and saying, "Will you be my mentor?" is not the right
Yeah, that's
advice,
not the
right?
right way
Yeah,
either.
yeah, 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 and that you believe me, that happens all the time where
Yeah.
people ask me, I'm like, "Look, let's chat,
Yeah.
and let's see where this thing goes." A couple years ago, I was just like you guys and everybody else who follows Jesse on Instagram. Like, this guy's the real deal, cool, funny, great family guy. Sarah's freaking badass. Follow all his stuff, read all his books, went to his book signing, met him that way. We signed up. One of my buddies broke his foot, and he was like, "Hey, I got 4 tickets to 29029, Jesse's event where you climb
Okay.
the height of Mount Everest." And I was like, "Let me call 3 friends who are crazy enough to do this on no training, no notice." So I called Devin, I called my boy Dan Churchill, and I called my brother Jake. And Dan and Jake were like, "Fuck, man." Devin was like, "No, I'm not fucking doing that. No way." I'm like, "Dev, come on, bro. We need you. Like, let's do this." He's like, "Fine, I'm in." So we show up. We get there the night before. It's in Sun Valley, Idaho, and Jesse and Devin knew each other from Instagram, right? They were messaging,
Mhm.
but they never met before. Jesse sees Devin, and he comes and sits with us at this table the night before, and I'm like, "Holy shit, Jesse's sitting with us. This is awesome." He's just like us, dude. If he was sitting on this couch, he'd be right there with us.
Yeah.
And we get to talking. He's like, "Fellas, the sun doesn't set till 10 p.m. I got this amazing hot spring in the woods. Let's go hit this. And then we got to be on this mountain at 6 a.m. tomorrow. Let's go hit this hot spring." And we did it in the freaking
Mhm.
Idaho mountains, hot spring into the cold river. It was just as cool as can be. While we're there, he's like, "Guys, I got a predicament." And he's talking to us like he's our boy. Just met this dude. He's like, "I got a predicament. I own the Atlanta Hawks. Hawks are in the playoffs tomorrow against the Sixers, and we're on this mountain." It was a 36-hour race, so it starts Saturday morning at 6 a.m., finishes Sunday night at 5 p.m. And he's like, "The game is Saturday night, so it's right in the middle of the event." And he's owns a private jet company. He's like, "I could fly private and come back, but this is my event. I have to be at this event." And we're like, "Dude, you got to go. Like, are you kidding me? This is why you own the team. Like, you have to go, come back, and we'll see you at the finish line." So race starts the next day, and we start ripping up this mountain, and it's harder than I thought, dude. Like, we had to do 15 reps up this
Mm.
mountain. 4 reps in, it's like 11 a.m. and Jesse calls us. He's like, "Guys, I'm going to the game, and you're coming with me." And he's like, "The only way you're coming with me is if you finish the race tomorrow. Like, you got 11 reps to go." And he's a math guy, so he's doing math in his head. He's like, "It's gonna take us 3 hours to fly there, 4-hour game, 3 hours back." He's like, "We could be on the mountain at 3 a.m." And we're like, "Yeah, dude, we're in. Let's do this." So dirty as hell, like in our dusty mountain clothes, we get on this dude's private jet. We fly to Atlanta. The Escalade picks us up. We show up into the bottom of the arena, and we're sitting courtside for Sixers Hawks playoff game. And halftime, we're doing shots with Meek Mill and Cam Newton and Sanjay Gupta in the owners' lounge. And I was 27. I'm like, "What the fuck is going? This is like the craziest thing ever." We get back on the plane. We sleep for like an hour on the plane. We're on the mountain at 3 a.m. and we finish all 11 reps. And it was a grind, dude. Breath smells like tequila. Like, we're exhausted. It was so hard, but it was like once in a lifetime thing. We did it. Jesse's like, "You guys did it. Let's go." But all that time, we got to spend time with him and talk like we're talking today. And,
Mm.
and we got a long way to go, in our lives and journeys as entrepreneurs. But I think there's the saying that real recognizes real is true, right?
Mm.
Like, Jesse wouldn't have invited us if he didn't know that we were doing good things and we're going to finish the
Mm.
race and like putting time, blood, sweat, sacrifice, tears into the work that we were doing as young men. And ever since then, that was 2 years ago. He's been a phone call away. We've gone to his events. We've helped him get all day running off the ground. He's come out to the ranch a few times, and it's just hanging out in the sauna, just chatting life. "Jess, what would you do in this situation?" Or, "Jimmy, how's the business going?" Or, "Hey, I'm speaking in Austin this week. You guys want to come see me and go for a walk around the lake?" And like that, I've never asked Jesse to be my mentor, but if I'm in a pickle, I'll call and he'll answer and he'll give us great advice. But I think that's earned through showing up, doing the work. Like, you're not gonna get a seat on that plane, metaphorically, if you're not doing the work, right? And
Yes.
if you're not making the sacrifices and doing things that other people aren't doing. Because Jesse did that his whole career, and he said, "Look, I see my 27-year-old selves in you guys. I can't wait to see what you do in your 30s and 40s," right? And he's like, "I know that today is stressful. I know that this is all or nothing, and Super Coffee's your life work. Just wait until you're 40." And, like, hearing that perspective is such a game changer.
Mm.
Yeah, there's so much value in that story. I feel like the first part is just the willingness to go to that event because you knew that you were going to put yourself in the room with the right people, people that you looked up to. Probably every reason under the sun to be like, oh, we're busy. I can't go to this. This would be cool. And then the second thing is like the respect that you probably earned from him by actually just like crushing the last 11 laps and doing it, where it's like, you didn't do those 11 laps. It probably wouldn't be the same level of relationship that it is now. Maybe it
Totally.
would have been, but maybe not. I don't know.
Yeah, no, absolutely not. Like, had we not finished or had we chose to sleep it off or got too hungover that you couldn't answer the bell, like, it wouldn't have he would have written us off and we never would have talked to him again. So I
Yeah.
think that was important. Showing up is important, right? Like, nobody's ever got lucky sitting on the couch,
Yeah.
and Jesse says this in his speech is like, if you don't have a seat at the table, create one.
Yeah.
And you have to put yourself in the game. You have to put yourselves in those positions to get lucky. You have to create those opportunities.
Yeah.
Were there other people there that he was thinking about inviting to the game, or was it just like you guys that he was like, "Come on,
I mean, it was just the 4 of us and
dang."
Jesse on the plane. It was crazy. Yeah, like, I think maybe his assistant came, but people had heard about it because when we got back, people were marching throughout the night, and had we not left, I think it would have been a grind, but we probably would have finished at midnight. Instead, we get back at 3 AM after midnight, and we grind up until the bell at 5 PM, and we finish. But we were passing people on the hill who had been going all night. They're like, "Oh, you're the guys who went to the game. Let's go finish." Like, it was cool because Jesse's an idol. And there's this whole, like, idolatry of innovators that we all see nowadays. Like, we all look up to that dude like he's a god, and he really is the real deal and something special. So I think the fact that we were the guys that he picked was meaningful to those around. I mean, I feel sort of arrogant and weird telling this story, but it was cool, man. Like, we put ourselves in that position, and Jesse's a great dude, and he's sort of put his arm around us. He's not an investor in the business. He's not a formal advisor, but if we need advice, he'll answer.
And that event was the genesis for All Day Running, which is
Totally.
incredible what you guys have built out with that.
Jesse is Devin's co-founder of All Day
Yeah.
Running, and that would not have happened had we let Devin say no.
Yeah. How was the Running Man event?
Dude, it was cool. It's
Yeah.
such a cool concept, right? Like, I don't like going to raves or big festivals and, like, doing drugs and dancing all night. Like, there's a time and a place to let it rip, but to do a festival like that and camp outside and go to live music and run a half marathon with Ken Rideout, like, awesome concept.
Dude.
I don't know, like, going back to the sort of Walmart example, I don't know how many people are out there that would sign up for that. Certainly our whole world would, but it's gonna get better every single year. I
Yeah.
hope they continue to do that.
Dude, we were just in Memphis and we didn't realize that Ken was gonna be running the race. I just see this guy freaking like sprinting past us. He was the first guy out of the gate, and we were at like mile 1 cheering our buddies on. That's Ken. He's here, and then we see him at mile 25. He's absolutely cooking. Like that dude is an absolute beast.
Animal, dude. Animal. And his mentality is so unique, right? Like, we're at Running Man, and Jesse's like, "I don't care if you're gonna walk 1 mile or run 100. Like, thank you guys for being here. This is all about you." Ken gets on stage. He's like, "If you get on that starting line, I'm gonna fucking kill you." He's like, "If it's me versus you, you're gonna fucking die." In his, like, thick Boston accent.
Yeah.
He's like, "I fucking love marathons because nobody's trying to punch me in the face." He's like, "This is great. I just fucking run." And that's what makes Ken so special and so unique. And talk about a guy who's 52 years old, had a brutal life. Like, he worked at the prison where his brother and his stepdad were incarcerated.
Mm.
And he 10 years addicted to opioids. This is all public information. And now he's putting in the work and that suffering, the pain, being recognized. He was here last week for the running event in Austin. I did a little shakeout jog with him before Memphis. And he was like, "Dude, The Rock just followed me. I'm going to work out with The Rock in LA." I'm like, "Ken, you fucking earned that shit, bro. Like, you earned that by being the best at what you do for your age, for your category." He's literally the best marathon runner over 50 in the world.
That's insane.
It's crazy.
He ran like it was like a 550 average mile. I think he did like a 235 or something. And he comments on Instagram. He's like, terrible day, shit the bed, tired.
Yeah.
You just ran a 235, dude. What are you talking about?
Yeah.
But that's his mentality though.
That's his mentality.
And
He said at the shakeout run, he was like, I'm gonna win the whole thing, and I don't want anybody to know that I'm going until I show up on the starting line. And I'm like, dude, I believe you. Right. And he's run 229s. He's broke 230 before. And that's probably why he was so disappointed, is because he didn't. But he still came in third overall as a 52-year-old badass. My dad is 52. It's crazy.
Yeah. And he's 52. And so when did he start getting popular? Like a year, 2 years ago, something like that?
Yeah, when I met Ken last year, I think he had like 12,000 followers.
Yeah.
You know, he's up over 40,000 now, and he's not saying anything. He's not speaking the gospel. He's just doing his job with everything he's got. And I think when people do something so authentically, so passionately, so uniquely, you get noticed and you get followed.
Yeah. But it took him until he was 51.
Right.
Right. It's like everyone's journey is just different. It's like that's why Jesse's advice is so good. It's like, wait till you're, in your 30s, 40s, 50s. Like you don't even know what's going to happen in the future. And you don't know when it's going to happen for you too.
Totally.
Yeah, the age of social media is really interesting because I feel like it's brought out a lot of people who feel like they need to be somebody else in order to get seen, or
Mhm.
people who like don't really know who they are, or they're just like trying to grow on social media and gain a following. And the best strategy is legitimately just be yourself and just be relentlessly hardworking, and you're gonna make it if you just over a long period of time if you just stick to that plan. Because I think a lot of people just get this like misguided opinion that they want more like bears in the world, like exactly like Nick Bear. It's like, dude, Nick Bear's Nick Bear. Stay in your lane. Like do your thing.
Yeah.
Um,
Ken's a great example. I think the two best examples in the last 2 years are Matt Troy, right? And just staying in his lane, running content exclusively. And he posts a lot of videos. I'm like, Matt, some of these things are corny as fuck. It's like, I know, but like the community likes it, and that's what he's built, right? And he's not posting CrossFit videos or High Rocks videos. He's posting running videos, right? Everything from what he eats to what he wears to how he shows up, how he trains. And it's paying off for him, right? He's owning a category. The other who is Natasha Vandermerve. And I think that's how you say it. I heard her pronounce that today.
Yeah.
It's Merve.
Yeah. I heard her pronounce that the other day. I'm like, say that again?
Yeah.
Who's awesome. She's my triathlon coach here in town. She's fantastic. When I met her in July of 2022, she had 15,000 followers. Today, she's over 140,000. She is, and it's all come down to these swimming lessons that she's been posting on Instagram. She's literally one of the best coaches I've ever been with. Like, you know how good players don't always translate into good coaches. Like the best player on your college baseball team is probably a bad coach.
Totally.
Like Mickey Mantle, right? He was the batting coach for the Yankees for like 10 minutes. And he was like, you got to swing at the quarter size spin on the ball. And the batter's like, Mickey, what the fuck are you talking about? Natasha is like arm high, thumb down. And I'm like, oh my God, that makes so much sense how you explain that. But she's went deep on these videos, sharing all of this content that she's passionate about, and it's paying off. She's not trying to be anybody other than who she is.
Yeah. Our buddy Tripp, I think he'd heard a lot about Matt Troy. And when he moved to Austin, maybe like a year ago or something like that, he saw him on the running path and just had this preconceived notion of like, oh, influencer, he's probably a douche or whatever. And Matt was running, and I think he had a camera or someone was following him with a camera. And he said, what's up to Matt? And Matt turned the camera off and was like, what's up, dude? Like, and they just had like an honest conversation for like 30 minutes. And he said after that, he was like, that guy will always have my respect. Cause he just wanted to talk to me and connect as a human being. And it's like the people that seem like they're really building those legit, authentic followings that are in a league of their own, whether it's the Natashas, the Matts, the Devins, whoever, it's like, they're all just really authentic, organic people.
That's it, dude. Authentic. And I think we're all looking for that, right? And those people have found it. And I think for those who don't, they try everything, right? They try to replicate what they see. And I've been guilty of this, but I think find your lane, commit to it. And even if at first it doesn't work, keep doing it, right? Matt will tell you, like when he first started creating videos, nobody was watching those things. And I think it took Mr. Beast something like 600 videos before he had 1 million views or 1 million subscribers. Like it takes a long time. And in those early days, it's easy to say, this idea that I had, the content that I've been creating isn't resonating, so nobody cares.
Yeah.
And if you give up, like anything is a 10-year ride, right? Like we're in year 8 at Super Coffee. I got at least 2 more years before this thing is a self-sufficient business plan and business.
Yeah.
And if you give up after 12 months and go on to the next shiny thing, like you'll never figure out what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you go about, so 2024 is a month away or now less than a month away. how do you go about planning for New Year's and just thinking about setting goals for yourself? It sounds like you were talking about some of your fitness goals and you're saying, I'm just gonna like crush the 5K distance and do that. Like, how do you go about setting that? Because something I always try to tweak, like every year, try to come up with like little ways to continue to improve the planning process.
Yeah, I think putting something on the calendar that holds yourself accountable, and preferably, like, the further out, the better. That 5K that I was talking about there's one in Carlsbad, California, on April 7th. I'm gonna sign up for that thing today, and then I have to train for it, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a cool thing to want to get faster at a 5K, but if I don't have a race, then I'm not gonna do it. Like, I ran
Mhm.
a 5K yesterday here in Austin, Jingle Bell 5K. It's like a fun little kid run, and that was my baseline for this training block for that April 7th race. And I think put something on the calendar that holds yourself accountable, even if it's, "Hey, I'm gonna fast for 3 days,
Mhm.
and I'm gonna do it at the end of every month," or, "I'm going to try and lose 10 pounds or gain 10 pounds," or whatever it is that you're trying to do. You have to put it on the calendar by a certain date. It's like business. You set smart goals, they're specific, they're measurable, they're ambitious. I think that's what the A is.
Yeah.
Relevant and time-based. They have to be time-based. And same thing with business. We in the early days we were bad at setting goals. We were super ambitious, but we always missed them. And that became a toxic thing because the
Mm.
sales team was grinding so hard. We'd grow sales by 100%, 80%, whatever, and everybody would feel like a bunch of losers because the goal that we set was too high. So some would say there's benefit in that because you missed and you still ended up in a good place, but I think we lost a lot of credibility setting these ambitious goals,
Mm.
telling investors, telling shareholders that we'd hit them, and then we didn't, even though we were outgrowing our competitors by 10x.
Yeah.
If we felt bad.
What are we breaking in Carlsbad? Are we breaking 15 minutes or what?
15? Oh my gosh.
What did you just do, 16 minutes or
17:08 or something yesterday, which is, yeah, like
15,
5
15 is insane.
15's
Yeah.
flying.
That's
15's flying.
Yeah.
But I'd like to shave a minute off. Sub
Nice.
16 would be awesome. If I could run 5-minute miles for 3.1, that'd be flying.
You gotta just find you a flat marathon. You do like a 257
Oh
or
my
something like
gosh.
that.
Yeah. I mean, shout out to everybody who ran CIM yesterday. Nick Bear, that dude is freaking built
Savage.
different. Yeah.
Was it like a 239 or something
It's
like that?
crazy.
Have
Dude.
you run with him or lifted with him before?
Yeah. He's just different, dude. It is like, I mean, I'll tell you what, I'll buy any supplement that guy makes.
Yeah.
Like,
Bro.
that dude is the real freaking deal. And then that's the other thing is like, walk the walk, man.
Mm.
Nick is not an entrepreneur. Nick is an athlete who wanted an edge. So he created products for himself so meticulously that they turned into an amazing business.
Yeah.
And it's a great brand. It's a great business. He's the real deal. But like, if you wanna get better, if you want to sign a coach, sign somebody who's built something bigger than what you want to be. If you want to be in better shape, hire a personal trainer who looks better than you want to look, right?
Mm.
Like, I hate going into these gyms where personal trainers are overweight and out of shape. It's like, I'm sorry, I'm not taking your advice.
It's no proof of work.
Yeah, no proof of work.
What gets you most excited for life right now?
Man, I'll tell you, I got engaged to Allison in September, and
Congrats.
thank you,
Yeah.
brother. We were dating 2.5 years, just about 2.5 years before I popped the question. And that has changed everything, and another Charlie Munger quote is the most important decision you can make is who you choose to marry.
Mm.
And I just feel so lucky and fortunate to have a partner who is smarter than me, better athlete than me, supportive, like just a great partner and a best friend. And I think that gets me really excited. We won't get married until 2025, but starting a family and spending the rest of my life with a partner who is my best friend and my lover and all these things is just, I'm fired up about it. So I think to anybody listening, like, don't settle,
Yeah.
until you find it, you don't know. Right. And I think a lot of people say, this is what it is. It's fighting, it's work, it's compromise, it's differences, it's all that. And maybe some relationships are, love is love, but, I did not know that this type of relationship existed until I
Mm.
met her.
Mm.
Did you knew pretty early on that she was the one?
On paper, yes. Like,
Yeah.
we got along, we were fit, we enjoyed hanging out with each other. We were good schools, like we were both on good, ambitious work tracks and all that. But like, I think 2 months in, I headed into the summer of 2021 single. I was like, this is gonna be a sweet summer in Austin,
Yeah.
And then I met her June 10th, and that summer was over.
That's how it goes, man.
Yeah, that's how it goes. So yeah, I'd say 2 or 3 months, but you know right away.
Yeah.
And once like, you don't have to rush. You
Yeah.
know, we dated for 2 years after we knew.
Yeah, it's cool to hear the excitement for the next chapter because there is this weird thing, like on social media, of like a lot of men that are preaching the concept of like mug mode or like, oh, if you want to be successful, like you need to be single. I feel like it's the complete opposite, honestly. When you find that person that really lights you up and motivates you to be better, it's like you access a different form that you could never access on your own.
Totally. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I'll tell you, I wouldn't be running marathons or fast 5Ks if it wasn't for her and just having her in my life. I wouldn't be as optimistic and ambitious about business if it wasn't her. And sure, like some nights I shut it off at 6 p.m. and I go home and I spend 3 hours with her before bed. And the next day I hit it even harder than I
Yeah.
would have rather than squeaking those last 3 hours out at the office that night and coming home tired and miserable. Like I charge up, man. It makes everything else, it makes me better at everything else.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would see her at some of those NVDM workouts. You both of you guys there, and she would be absolutely cooking on the track, dude.
Yeah,
You guys would
she's
both be
built different,
flying.
man.
Yeah.
Look, I think what drives people is also what torments them sometimes, right? Like people who strive for greatness are never happy with where they're at, and it's what makes them great. But it's also what we all struggle with, you know. And
Yeah.
I'm definitely built that way. And she is super ambitious, super talented, and I mean we have fun doing it step for step.
Yeah.
You guys think you'll stay in Austin?
I don't know. She works at Meta here in town, and she's getting her MBA from UT at night. She doesn't graduate until May of 25, so I think we're certainly here through that point. I love Austin, man. Austin has been so good to us. We've been here for 3 years now. Just a great fitness community, great
Yep.
entrepreneurship community. I kind of found myself in Austin, you know, meaning like up until moving here. I moved here when I was 28, but I lived in New York City for 5 years.
Mhm.
And as a 20-something-year-old in New York starting a business, you're trying to be something. You
Yeah.
know, you're trying to be that thing that you expect other people expect you to be,
Mhm.
you know, and that's just not a good way to live. And then when I got to Austin, I was like, whoa, there are no expectations anymore. Let me
Yeah.
do the things that I want to do. And I met Allison at a triathlon. You know, I wasn't
Yeah.
doing triathlons in New York City. So I think once you find your lane, just do it unabashedly and just purely. And I think good things will come to you.
Yeah. Well, dude, I think that's an amazing way to put a bow on this conversation. I mean, this has been a long time coming, you know, exceeded expectations. We're just pumped to get to know you, to be friends with you, have such admiration for what you've built and what you're continuing to build, and stay soon. We need it to happen,
Oh,
bro.
dude, before the end of the year, yeah, we'll get a garage workout. This was awesome, man. I'm excited for you guys. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for the product that you create. I take it every day. Noble is the
Get you more.
best protein on the market. Sorry, ProMix. Sorry, Dev.
I'm
But
gonna
that
clip
shit
that
is
and
good,
send it
man.
to him.
Yeah, it is good. And I'm excited to see what you guys can do with it.
Appreciate you, man.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming on.
rock on, fellas. This was
Thanks,
great.
Jimmy.